r/AskReddit by Planet Reddit. Police officers of Reddit. What is the dumbest reason you have been called to a scene? Reporting party said a pigeon was acting strangely on her deck. It wouldn't fly away. It flew away when I clapped my hands. Also had a call for 2 people riding bikes smiling suspiciously. Also had a call for 2 people riding bikes smiling suspiciously. Missionaries? You got it. Lady called because a cat was in her yard. Not attacking anybody or anything like that. It was just in her yard. Even better is that we had to do a report every time we responded to a call, even if no citations were issued. So in my report, I put a cat as the suspect and a calico as its race. I belong to an online neighborhood board. Some woman went off because people walk their dogs and the dogs poop on her lawn. We all agreed that not cleaning up after your dog is terrible. She clarified and said that everyone was picking up the poop but it was leaving germs on her lawn, so she called the police. I'm animal control. I take this call at least once a week. Had one lady provide me months of surveillance videos documenting at least 6 cats entering her yard. No pooping. Digging up the yard. Spraying. Nothing like that, just playing with butterflies and sitting on the fence. Mostly. The call is from some entitled middle-aged dude who is pissed about something his neighbor is doing and can't do anything about it, so he calls about the cat. Then when I say I can't do anything about it cause it's not against the law, he threatens my life. Yay. Responded to the outside of the county jail one time, LA. County Twin Towers, and had to actually fight a guy trying to climb the fence into the jail. This may not sound like much until you realize we had to fight a guy in order to prevent him from entering the jail. Then drive around the back and put him in jail. LA. Is ducking weird? Something similar happened to me. I was actually locked up in jail. I was a model inmate and so I was put on trustee inmate worker status, and one job I had was to bring out the garbage from the intake area to around the side of the jail to where the dumpsters are located. I was allowed to wear street clothes while doing community service. Anyhow, I dragged these bags of garbage around the jail to the dumpsters and suddenly 2 police officers approach me and start yelling at me they are going to arrest me for trespassing. I laughed because I thought they were joking and continued throwing the bags in the dumpsters. That apparently pissed off the one and he continues to handcuff me. He said I was under arrest for criminal trespass. It took me a couple minutes to convince them that I'm already in their jail. But I'd gladly leave the property and never come back if that's okay. They said no. What happened after that? We get these a couple times a week. My child won't. Brush teeth, go to school, clean room, do homework, get out of bed. Yup. Living the dream. I was dispatched to a house. Referencer reported vandalism to a vehicle. When I got there, the guy who called was standing by his car. I saw that there was no visible damage to the vehicle. His complaint was that dust picked by the wind was coming from his neighbor's yard and landing on his car. The guy actually wanted to file a criminal complaint. My first thought was maybe I was dreaming this nonsense. All I could do in response was stare at him and I said absolutely nothing. The guy became uncomfortable and explained his complaint again. I couldn't help but just stare at him. At the time, I didn't think I could say anything to him that didn't sound insulting. I think he finally got it since he just went inside his house and never called us again. I would pay good money for a body cam recording of that. And the police department's budget problems were solved. I'm not a cop. But a few years ago when I was moving into a house, I was doing most of my moving late at night. The nosy old couple across the street kept calling the cops and reporting suspicious activity. The first time the cops showed up they were prepared for a criminal. Hands on guns. Flashlights in my eyes. But by the 4th time they just said with me and finally told the couple to stop calling the police. I'm not sure what made the couple think burglars would bring stuff into the house instead of taking it out. What made the couple think? Stop right there. Chief. You've already gone too far. Adventures of the Young Burglar. Once responded to a call originating in the sheriff's department parking lot. Literally walked out of the doors into the following for stir clerk. A woman who had just gotten released from jail's ex-girlfriend came to pick her up. Drunk. On a moped. The reason it got reported is that the drunk woman was doing donuts in our parking lot waiting for her ex. Lost control and rammed a police car. My training sergeant always had a saying that ran true that day. We don't catch the smart ones. Officer here, been working 2 years in a large city. The first call that truly made me question my job choice was a disturbance between a husband and wife. Officers had been out in the house earlier in the day and the wife called 911 a second time. The wife called and said she and her husband were arguing because she wanted to have sex but he refused because her vagina stunk. It is difficult to remain professional. Not a cop, but an EMT. I was called to a sick person, which turned out to be a perfectly fine person that just wanted a medical checkup. And thinking EMTs were doctors, we would just give him one for free. Took an intro to EMS course years ago, part of which consisted of listening to actual 911 calls. Hey, my friend, his eye really hurts. He needs an ambulance. And gave a rural address. Ambulance responds. And holy shit. Dude had an arrow sticking out of his eyeball. Turns out it was a hold my beer reenactment of that whole shooting an apple off the dude's head. The arrow received 0 mentions in the call. Had a friend who was an EMT in Detroit for a while. Quickly learned that chest pains is a euphemism for having been shot stabbed that's used surprisingly often. Thing is, if they say shot stabbed, 911 is required to send police as well. But chest pains just gets an ambulance. Cop here. We have a guy in town who is paraplegic and confined to a wheelchair. He also has a totally abrasive personality and is an all-around awful person. The county pays for a caretaker, but he either fires them or they quit because they won't cater to his unreasonable demands. He called 911 once because his trash cans didn't get moved to the curb before trash day and he wanted the police to come do it for him. The dispatcher routed me the call. I called into dispatch and told them that I was absolutely not going out to put this guy's trash cans out. They ended up sending the fire department out after enough cops mutinied and refused to go. Working front desk at a hotel. Buddy called 911 on me because I wouldn't give him a free upgrade. He should have called William Shatner instead. My neighbor hated my Mustang. He started calling the cops on me for drag racing. No. I'm accelerating to the speed limit of 45 from a stop sign. Anyway. He started calling the cops on me when it was a pickup truck, the UPS truck, the garbage man, etc. If he heard a V8, it had to be me. I spent a couple weeks in Germany. One night my parents get a knock on the door. It's the police. They had reports of me drag racing again. My parents handed the officers my keys and said he's been out of the country for 2 weeks. You can go feel the engine if you want. The police apologized for disrupting my parents' evening. At the apartment tower I worked security for, some Saudi royal family members called the cops because the hooker they hired took the money and ran. Cops said, "Sure, you can have the money back, but you have to admit to misdemeanor solicitation to do so." Before people ask, their cars had KSA, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, license plates and the Saudi royal family crest on it. Also, they admitted to what they did to the cops. So in order for the cops to take the theft report, they would have to include the solicitation report. Cops gave them a break by letting them all go. Edit. For everyone wondering. Yes, they have diplomatic immunity. Those cops didn't voluntarily give them a break. You don't mess with people that rich if you care about your career and life. Saudi Arabian royalty don't forget. And they sure as hell don't forgive. My dad works for a car dealership out there. His co-worker sold a car to a prince and it was scratched in the warehouse. Nothing to do with the co-worker, but when he attempted to leave the country and return to England he was arrested at the airport. The prince had paid to get his visa blocked and have him arrested, and that's exactly what happened. He made it back home 2 weeks later and left that job for good. It really is that bad out there. Soon to be police officer here. When I was doing an internship with the local sheriff's office, I was with one deputy and we got called out on a domestic disturbance. Before we could get there, a city police officer intercepted the call and took it. Since it was just outside city limits and we were still 15 minutes away, So we continued to patrol the county when the same people called again, specifically asking for a deputy to come out to the scene. We get there and right off the bat this woman is going on about how when the city police officer he was very rude to her and she wanted us to go arrest him and have him fired for unpolicemanlike conduct. I'm not joking. I had to turn away to keep from laughing in this woman's face. She was very angry because he allegedly said the word duck in front of her daughter. Keep in mind this woman was using the word duck 3 or 4 times in each sentence. We pretty much told her that our department doesn't police other departments and that she should contact the chief of police and make a formal complaint. This did not sit well with her and she told us we needed to leave before she called the cops. Again. Not joking. At this point the guy I was with couldn't take it anymore and told the woman that he was arresting himself and taking himself downtown and we left trying not to bust out laughing. If everything goes right I will have some more stories once I get hired by the sheriff's office. TLDR. Lady called cops. Called cops on cops. Threatened to call cops on those cops. Yo dog. And, in a surprise twist, cops call cops on cops. My grandma was recovering from surgery in the hospital once. She had to share the room with this senile woman. I was really young but this woman was so memorable. Whenever she needed something, hungry, bed raised, whatever, she would dial out to 911. Like multiple times in an hour. Because you call 911 for help. I guess eventually dispatch called the hospital and told the nurses station what was happening and they had to go in there and talk to her about it. Hilarious though. So many. A woman found a half-eaten sandwich in her unfenced backyard. She thinks someone threw it there to poison her dog. She saved the sandwich and wanted us to test it for poison. A man called because his trampoline was blowing away in a windstorm. One woman called because someone stole her American flag from her front yard. One of those little tiny yard flags that are about 1 foot tall and plant in your grass. She called the morning after a particularly bad and windy thunderstorm. I had to explain to her that it's much more likely that the flag blew away than someone maliciously stole a 50-cent flag. I then found in a nearby sewer drain. My dog is acting strange. Can you send a police officer? Happens more than you think. My favorite is people who call in because people are driving too fast through the neighborhoods. So we go out there and run radar. 9 times out of 10. The person caught speeding is the person who called in the complaint to begin with. I live in a neighborhood. I drive a black car and it looks sporty. So I routinely have moms with strollers telling me to slow down. And I'm always going 15 miles an hour under the speed limit. They got to where they would be waiting for me to come home to yell at me. They called the cops. The cops sat in the woods for apparently 2 weeks getting my speeds. I didn't know. I couldn't see them. Whelp clocked me under every day going to work and back. They ended up telling the women to leave me alone or they would arrest them for harassment without me even asking him to do anything. My justice boner is tingling. I have a family friend that works for 911 dispatch and her favorite call was when a guy called in because he got his balls caught in his jeans zipper. He thought he was going to die and kept crying on the line. My dad was a dispatcher 30 years ago. Hi, I'm not sure if this is an emergency, but I think my wife is dead. A friend of mine who is a police dispatcher said a woman called the police because her teenager took the rest of the Doritos from the cupboard and wouldn't put them back. You can't prove that. So this semester in class a student had lost the lock for his bike. So he brought it into the classroom and set it against the back wall. This was against the rules because in a 200-person lecture hall 100 bikes would crowd the room. However, this was a spacious classroom with 20 students. The professor said that he did not mind the bike being there. Well, the professor next door did mind. He saw this guy bringing his bike inside and told him it was against the rules. The student said okay and walked past. Next week professor sees the bike again and says if you bring that bike in here again I'm calling the police. The student laughs it off and walks past. Next week during class there was a knock on the classroom door. 4 police officers had shown up. One had her hand covering her face in embarrassment and said we received a call that said there was a bike in here which is against the rules making this trespassing. The bike needs to leave or else we have to arrest you. The student said he doesn't have a lock and it will get stolen. Professor knocks some sense into this kid and tells him to go home, then it's not worth getting arrested over one lecture. In the end no arrests were made. I don't think there was a fine either. Police officers all had a look saying why are we here and looked embarrassed. The professor who called the police probably got the bad end of that deal though. The professor whose class was interrupted has a lot of clout at the university and didn't take kindly to the whole situation. You would think that the student could have gotten a lock after 3 weeks. Could have gotten one at the campus bookstore for $962. There was a lady that called the cops on a homeless shelter because they wouldn't let her turn the dorm into a sauna, said she was freezing, but refused blankets. Wanted to use a fire hazard space heater. Cops came, saw the dorm was over 65F, and told her that it wasn't an emergency and left. Had an elderly frequent caller report trespassing. I show up and don't see anyone around but her. She said mosquitoes were landing on the neighbor's dog droppings. She distressingly explained how the mosquitoes would then fly over the fence onto her property. I heard a 911 call where an old woman called the police because she couldn't open a jar. The woman actually sent the police to help. I was listening to the scanner once and someone called 911 because a dog was standing on a balcony. And as they were walking by they saw him standing looking down at the street and thought he was thinking of jumping suicidal. Officer comes over the radio. We're really gonna go to this? I've heard one where an actual police officer called 911 because him and his wife tried weed and he was freaking out thinking they were going to die. I went to a house for suspicious footprints in the snow. The footprints led to the oil tank. So I checked the mailbox with the homeowners and found an oil delivery receipt. Oh. The reverse oil bandit strikes again. The first time my parents left me home alone. At age 7. I called the cops because there was a man with a wrench in our fenced-in backyard. I got really scared and thought he was going to break in and hurt me. Turned out he was just fixing pool heater. My parents weren't expecting him since he was returning to finish a job he started yesterday, which my parents thought he'd finished. Dude decided hiking the fence was easier than coming to the door and asking to be let in. Plus he assumed no adults were home since no cars were there. He was in plain clothes. The cops were very nice about it and did not yell at me even though I dragged them out for no reason. My parents, on the other hand, will never let me live down the Killer Pool Man of Doom incident. This has got to be up there. Wait till the end. YouTube.com link. I laughed way too loudly at the ending of that. Just wow. This may be apropos of nothing, but I called the police once because there was a guy wandering the mall parking lot across the street from my house screaming duck as loudly as possible and seemed to be trying to force his way into the mall. I didn't call 911. Just police HQ because it wasn't an emergency. 9 cruisers showed up within 5 minutes. Must have been a slow night. Possible mentally unstable people in public can go bad quickly. I once called the police because there were hundreds of thousands of maggots covering a huge parking lot and I was convinced there was a body in the nearby dumpster causing the infestation. I might have been drinking a bunch. Well, something has to have attracted some creepy crawlies. That's suspicion enough. And it's the police's job to check those things out. That's a good reason to call. Sure. But that's an instance to find out the non-emergency police number in the area, I'd think. I'm an EMT and was listening to the police channel on the radio one night. We hear county to district X cars. We just had a female caller state that there is a black male wearing a hoodie walking down her street. Unit on the road. Okay. What does she want us to do? Dispatch. No idea. My partner and I laughed for a good half hour over that one. My neighbors have reported the following. Lawn clippings on their sidewalk. Apparently my dad, who was in the hospital, blew the clippings onto their walk. Not having a fence around an above ground pool and worried their 18-year-old kid is going to drown. Yard has a fence around it, but pool itself doesn't have any barriers. It complies with local bylaws. Our dog barking overnight. We don't have a ducking dog, but they do. Our car being parked in our driveway and they didn't have enough room to erect a non-compliant Fence. The fence partially falling over because it was installed incorrectly. Having a fire in legal fire pit. Worried it's going to burn their house down, which is 40+ feet away. Having our camper parked in the driveway and not being able to see out their window. The only thing they can see out that window is the outside wall of our house. And a tree. I have dumb ducking neighbors. This isn't even everything. Just what I can remember off the top of my head. Sounds like you need to buy an Annoyatron. Purchase device. Hide in neighbor's car/house. Hopefully they'll lose their last grip on sanity within the week. The Dark Lord will hear their anguished cries and come forth from the abyss to claim their souls. Profit. My dad in the early 80s was high as shit and called the cops to report that his neighbor stole his pot. Apparently some guy did that in r/legal advice the other day. He then asked for legal advice about it. It was awesome. I had a friend whose mom worked for the city. She would get complaints all the time for the dumbest things in the rich neighborhoods. She got a call for there being too much salt on the road in the winter time. And a signed petition from everyone in the neighborhood to get rid of a nearby car mechanic because they thought his shop was too trashy even though he'd be in business there for 20 years before the development was built. Signed petition from everyone in the neighborhood to get rid of a nearby car mechanic because they thought his shop was too trashy even though he'd be in business there for 20 years before the development was built. This stupid shit makes me furious. Those ducking idiots bought houses in that neighborhood knowing there was a car mechanic shop right down the street and yet he is somehow in the wrong because they don't like living next to his business. They should have bought homes somewhere else then. There's an actual legal term for this. Coming to a nuisance. Basically it means that if you move in next to something established that you later decide to not like, that you can go duck yourself. A woman called 911 at 5 AM to report her son would not get up to wash the dishes. She went to jail. Edit. Many are asking why she went to jail. Misuse of 911 is a crime in my jurisdiction. One's child not doing the dishes is not a valid use of 911 services. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for 3 videos a day.